be showing you how to simulate craters on Mars. And first thing we're going to do is we have this big pan here. And we're going to be putting grits, dry grits, in the bottom to simulate the bedrock of Mars. So as you can see now, she's kind of putting just a fairly thin layer on the bottom, just enough so that you can't actually see the metal, and then we'll kind of smooth it out so that there's no big hills or anything like that in it. So yeah, you want to try to make it where you can't really see the bottom, because you want for the rocks that we're using as impactors to actually be able to create a hole in it. So now that we have that all nice and smoothed out, the next layer that we're going to put on top is flour. And this is going to simulate, you know, the regolith and the dirt that's on top of the bedrock. So, no, it's fine. So, the flour you want to put on a little thicker, because it's pretty clumpy. Okay, see if that's enough. So then you can sort of just spread that out on top of the grits. So basically when you're making this, you want to make sure that the layers don't mix, because clearly, you know, bedrock and dirt don't really mix on Mars. So you want to be able to see the layers when you actually have the crater, so that we can sort of simulate what happens on a real crater on Mars. And the flour, you don't have to necessarily smooth out quite as much as you did the grits, because it is a little clumpy. So now that we have these two layers, and actually we can even add a little bit more flour, just so that we can have enough to make several impacts. So, make it nice and even. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to put some cocoa, or we also have coffee on the top to simulate the top layer of dust and dirt, basically. And as you can see when I start putting this on here, it's actually about the color of Mars. So you guys want to open that and we can sort of mix the two?
Yeah. I'm also going to make some coffee packets with it as well.
For different textures. So, you know, one thing you want to be careful about though is you don't want to mix the cocoa with the flour too much, because then you won't have a nice dark layer on top. You'll sort of have a brownish white layer. So what you can do with the different colors, if you want, is you can sort of simulate different features of the Martian geography. So, you know, this might be something like a darker area, and then here you have a higher area that might be lighter in color. You can mix the two.
It smells good.
Yeah. Now finally we're going to add some rocks to the top. So we have these little candies, little balls. We're just going to sprinkle some on top just to simulate, you know, if you have some pebbles sitting on the top layer here. As you can see, even these pebbles are sinking a little bit.
And just like on Mars, the pebbles are multicolored.
Yep. And actually, another interesting thing about using coffee and cocoa is they have completely different textures. The cocoa is very, very fine, so things are going to go into it much easier. But this is much harder, so it's more like you know, a lava plane or something, where the impactor is not going to be able to go as far. Alright, so now we get to throw rocks. So, as you can see, you guys want to pick up some rocks so we can show it to the camera? We have a lot of different sizes of rocks and different shapes.
And different textures.
Yep. So we can look at, you know, what the different kinds of rocks, what shapes that they make.
And if you notice, this one is a bit porous and these are very solid. There are different densities of meteorites, obviously. There are stony meteorites and there are conglomerates, or chondrites, excuse me. And they will fragment differently and impact differently.
Alright, so clearly we're not going to get into fragments here, but do you want to do the biggest one first?
Alright, so I'm just going to pretend this one's coming straight onto the planet, so 90 degrees. So it's ready.
So you can actually see that it bounced and sort of made a little track, but you can actually see the different layers. You can see the coffee, and then you can see the flour underneath, and the rocks went down into the hole, and you can actually see a little bit of the grits too. And actually right here you can see where it sort of caved in and almost made like a little cliff, and you can actually see those round craters. So now let's do this nice round one here, and we'll see how this makes a difference. And I'm also going to do this in the cocoa side, which also might make it look different. So this one made a much deeper impact, probably because this is a lot softer.
Also because it wasn't centered, but
Well,
minor technicality.
okay.
So I'm going to try and throw this one at an angle.
So yeah, that one made a lot of splash, and you can see that it's sort of deeper where it first hit, and then it makes a shallow trench in the opposite direction of where it came from. So impactors that come at an angle, we can actually see what direction they came from. And actually, if you look at the splatters of cocoa powder on the table, you can see they have little rays that point away from the meteor, which is kind of cool. Can't really see that in there. So yeah, you can throw them from different angles, like throw one from an almost horizontal angle, and that one sort of got buried. Then you can also do things like make overlapping craters and see what happens there, because you do have a lot of overlapping craters, especially on places like Mars and the Moon, for example. You can see these. So
Just simulate one of those right now. Or attempt to anyway.
So yeah.
Interesting note. Secondary craters are often found around larger primary craters, and in effect, this splatter here, these would normally form the secondary craters around primary craters, such large craters such as these.
Yeah. Because sometimes the ejecta, these little rocks that we have, they get sprayed up too, and they might make another crater. You can sort of see that over here. Like, I didn't put rocks over here in this part, but they ended up there. So yeah, and then you can just have fun with it.
If you're feeling adventurous, you can try different layers, think of your own stuff and simulate different sedimentary environments.
That's the basic idea.